Hi everybody, welcome back to Dynamic Alignment Bodywork. I'm Liam and I'm actually not in my office, as you can probably tell. I'm at my parents' house in Missoula, Montana. I'm here seeing them and visiting some family vacation time and actually seeing a few clients, which is pretty cool. So part of what I've been doing the last couple of days here has been spending a lot of time on the computer, and which is a pretty normal part of my life aside from the work I do. Anyway, I wanted to do a quick session on what we can do to help open up the forearms and the hand. For a lot of us, this can be a pretty sticky and tricky area where carpal tunnel syndrome, thoracic outlet syndrome, if you've ever heard of that, golfer's elbow and tennis elbow, right? Call them whatever you want. It doesn't necessarily, as a lot of you know, doesn't necessarily come from golf or tennis, but overuse and misuse symptoms of the hand and forearm. In general, our whole soft tissue system in some areas, like a holding is really important, like in the low back is a lot of that soft tissue, fascia and muscles is meant to be really, really stable. A lot in the forearm and hand is a lot about gliding. So you can imagine, there are muscles right here, and as they go out into the hand and it turns more tendinous and connective tissue, that those tissues need to be able to slide past each other because this is such a mobile and articulate set of many, many joints. When that glide doesn't happen as well, there tends to be some more rubbing, inflammation, and we can get something like what we call carpal tunnel, right? Like things through the tunnel right over the wrist, connective tissue band, things not moving through there very well, and then inflammation and swelling happening, and that pressure hurts and causes numbness because nerves are right along in with the veins and arteries and that whole scene, as a lot of us know. So a couple quick things you can do to wake up your forearm and hand, and really anytime. I'd say a few times a day is a great reset button, and this is one of those things that I have benefited a lot from. The more I can kind of remind myself to do this, it can be easy to be complacent, but every time I take 60 seconds, I'm like, yeah, that was so nice. Such a good idea. So, they may be familiar stretches, but I'd encourage you to look at what we're about to do with a fresh eye, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. So one is about opening up this front area, this flexor surface, right? We type a lot, and this gets used to a familiar pattern, a way of being. So in a lot of ways, we're just like throwing a wrench in our own gears. That's a lot of what stretching and working out. You could look at that. There's a lot of research coming out saying stretching actually isn't lengthening muscle per se. It's not like a passive thing where you're actually changing the length of the tissue. You're giving yourself a stimulus, and then your body is reorganizing around that. So, opening up with the forearm and hands, you can take your opposite thumb, place it here, across, and I'm just gently opening up all the way down to my fingertips and pushing a little bit back here, kind of finding a nice zero balance, leverage point, right, where I'm not just prying, nor am I just pushing, but opening up here. And here's where I want to talk about looking at this with a fresh eye. It's one thing to sit at your computer and, you've been typing all day, I'm kind of exaggerating the slouch, right? And then okay, I'm just kind of taking a minute here. If we talk about throwing a wrench in our own system and our own neurology, here, sort of reinforcing a crappy position, right? I have this posterior, this backwards tilt of my pelvis happening. So I'm sitting on my tailbone, coming up, and then for sure I'm getting a little bit of that stretch. But again, this is less about lengthening anything here and more about waking it up. So in the spirit of that awakening, I encourage you to sit up, find a neutral pelvis while you're sitting. You can look at my last video, or there's lots of good resources, but that's a good one to start. You can tilt your pelvis a little bit forward, come to the front of the sits bones, find a nice way of sitting if you're not already there. Take a couple deep breaths, and now I'm starting to lengthen from a position of good alignment. And one of the hallmarks of good alignment, and I've said this before, is that I can really, there are no real blank spots in my body. Like here, okay, this is kind of this, force dump, like a place where I'm checking out, right? I can feel my legs and then my arms again. So I want to be seated in a way where I can feel my legs all the way up my spine with my breath. Now, I'm going to start to open. Here, I can hold this. This feels really, really good for me. And again, another good hallmark of good stretching is it should feel nice. That's really an underrated thing in our society. So it feels good, opening up and taking breaths into my upper chest, clavicles. Not as some heroic thing where I'm prying myself up, but just lifting up. 30, 60 seconds. Switch to the other side. You can also try this standing. Right? Should be great. I get up off my chair. And same thing, take a moment to, and I show you this side profile to talk about this pelvic to hip to head alignment. Take a moment to stand, maybe play with, again, that neutral pelvis in a way that feels good to stand. Okay, take a couple deep breaths here. Opening up my forearms. So again, I'm not dumping force or reaching out, but I can rotate my shoulder. We'll give it a little bit more stability. Open up here. Deep breaths. Again, 30 to 60 seconds each side. I've actually gone through a round of this, so I'll do it again. One other quick thing you can do for your own forearms that can feel nice is just a little self-massage. You can do this with your hands or with your elbow, right? So the opposite elbow across, I can put it on the table. But I would look at this less if you've had a massage before, like a Swedish oiled up. That can be great, and you can definitely do that to yourself too. Or have a partner or a friend push your forearm tissues up with a little oil on their hands. You can also, similar to a few videos ago, I talked about releasing the nerves of the foot, and there's kind of that tacky feel where you hook just below the skin. You can do the same thing with your fingers on the forearm. So here's the point of my elbow, I'm wrapping around, and just finding a place that feels good. I hook, and I open up my hand, right? I can just, so I'm really just pinning on top and then moving from underneath, getting those sliding surfaces sliding. I can do the same thing here, right? Moving my hand. I don't know if you can see this very well, but I'm just setting this down on a table. Right, hand up, I can take my arm. And same thing, I'm not sliding as much as just kind of hooking and pushing in. I can move my hand. 30 seconds to a minute on each arm. Just a little bit of movement for the sake of movement inside there. And again, I like that analogy of throwing a wrench in my own gears of I do this, for a long, long time, getting up and doing something different, hitting reset, moving around in a different way for a couple minutes, and then get back to work. Happy Friday, and see you next week.